More studies are coming out showing that near-death experiences is something that happens at the level of the brain and does not prove an afterlife. The landmark study that everyone's kind of building on at this point was this 1997 study where we looked at fighter pilots who were experiencing extreme G-forces and they were having symptoms of near-death experiences. So when these pilots were experiencing G-LOC or G-force induced loss of consciousness, they would experience a bright white light, tunnel vision, a floating sensation like they were leaving their body, peace, euphoria. Their life would flash before their eyes and have really vivid memories. Sometimes they would have dream states and they would talk to loved ones who had passed on, time distortion, everything that you experience with near-death experiences. And it's actually laboratory reproducible, meaning you can give someone a near-death experience. And so as we're actually able to study this in a lab, we're coming to the conclusion that NDEs are the result of oxygen deprivation, endorphin release in order to ease pain and fear, REM intrusion, which is like just going into your dream state, and then temporal lobe activity, which increases like intense spiritual experiences or out-of-body experiences. So it's interesting that NDEs are only happening with certain states of the brain, but if you're dying in a different way, then you don't get a near-death experience. If you're dying from blunt force trauma, you're not going to have a near-death experience, but if you're having lack of oxygen to the brain, then we're seeing these near-death experience kind of symptoms, even if you're not dying, even if you're just experiencing it because of G-LOC. So there's been lots of studies since then that kind of support that hypothesis. The most recent one in 2025 in Scientific Review was watching people's brains as they experience euthanasia. And it looked like, based on what we were seeing in the brain, that as the brain was shutting down and as they were in the active dying process, that the brain went into like a hallucinatory state. So the most recent studies are showing that the brain doesn't die all at once. And so when people are talking about near-death experiences, these are just kind of like the last fireworks of the brain. So it's not that I don't believe in near-death experiences because I for sure know what happens after death, or I know what consciousness is, or I know what ultimate reality is, or any of that. It's more so that we're getting to the point that we have a better naturalistic explanation for what's going on than we do a supernatural explanation that's based in our fear of death. Because anytime we do that in history where we have a supernatural explanation that we really want to be true because we're afraid to die, we're wrong. We're wrong about that jump. And the naturalistic explanation in the end is the one that usually makes more sense and is accepted eventually. Just how we used to think that people who had schizophrenia had demons, and now we've kind of like outgrown that belief. I think we'll look back at near-death experiences in the same way, that we just didn't understand what the brain was doing as it was losing oxygen. And so we jumped to a supernatural explanation that just made us feel better about death. I'm going to do a